by Steve Chandler, Brian Jones and Jess Badley, all talking the future of work. I'm going to throw them straight in the deep end and ask my first question. We're going to start with you, Steve, a bit of an intro of who you are, what your background is, what you're doing now, and then what do you see as the future of work?
Right. At present, I'm two things. One, I'm running Coinbase. It's a cryptocurrency-based trading platform where you can buy and sell anything you wish, as long as you're prepared to pay or accept crypto. Mm-hmm. One of four leading cryptocurrencies. And I also work 2 days a week helping entrepreneurs in Manchester and Northwest get their business up and running and keep them running. And in terms of the future of work, I think we're going through some major changes. The output of that won't be seen for 20 years, but I think what we do over the next 18 months, 2 years, will have a profound effect on industry, on manufacturing, and on the way that the services industry integrates itself into those two disciplines. You see changes that were as a result of policy back in the 80s coming through now, and what the government and the bodies are doing today won't really show through for 20 years. But we've got, like I say, 18 months now as we seek to rebuild post-COVID to make some serious changes. Otherwise, we are going to fall further and further behind both Europe and the US. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Steve. Great introduction. Jess, I'll move on to you.
Thank you. So I'm Jess Badley. I work as Head of HR and OD at Blood Cancer UK. And I've worked in the charity sector for probably most of my career to date, although I did start off in the private sector. In terms of what I think the future of work looks like, so I'm hoping that this is a really exciting time for us, actually, and that we can use some of the good things that have happened and learn from them. I really believe that work is a verb and not a place. I think obviously that is different for every organisation, and I think for the future of work, it's really important to remember that one size just really doesn't fit all. And that, yes, we can see lots of people in the media telling us how every organisation should work, but in reality, that's not how life is. And I think hopefully that we can weave in some of the wider themes around things like equality, diversity and inclusion into the future of work, and really make sure that work changes for the better, but for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we can definitely throw in education there as well, and businesses' priorities to the education system in this country. So definitely a conversation point for later. Finally, and certainly not leastly, if that's even a word, I'm going to move on to Brian Jones. Brian, can you do a brief intro and give us your take on the future of work?
Sure. Thanks, Jenny, and thanks for having me. And good morning again, Steve and Jess. Yes, I'm Brian Jones. I'm the chairman of Bloor Research International, which is primarily a technology research company. But of course, as we know, technology impacts everything one way or another, including and increasingly the future of work. My background is I had 15 years on the executive boards of FTSE 100 companies. I tended to be a change specialist in particular. I was conscious, even I think back in those days, that change shouldn't really be a 3 or 4 or 5 year program. It needed to be something that was permanent. And I believe very much at the moment that the future of work is about creating models for work that are continually adapting and adaptable. And I could not agree even an iota more with Jess when she says, one size does not fit all. It absolutely does not. Organizations need to embrace new business models. They need to embrace new ways of working. And absolutely, they need to be values driven. So the whole concepts of diversity, inclusion, the ability to allow people to create the right kind of balance in the work environment. I won't just call it the workplace, because work isn't a place. I quite agree again. So I think it's about the future of work is about creating and unleashing capability. As Steve was saying, we can't be left behind. We have to use the change that's been accelerated by recent changes, recent events, crises, whatever, and we have to see that as an opportunity to become much more continuously adaptive and continuously focused on building, developing capability, talent, in order that we can regain some of the ground that we have lost over recent years, I believe.
Yeah, I think we're in a time of turmoil, and whether that's positive or negative is in the eye of the beholder, right? I think there's never been greater child poverty in this country, which is kind of shameful as a developed nation. There's government has a lot to answer for at the minute, but like you say, it's historical governments that also have a lot to answer for. The world is changing, but for me, one thing that I do see across social media, across interactions with people out in the street, there is that overwhelming need to build back better, to use, a political phrase. People want change. The time is now. So I guess my second question is it changing now? Do you see from the employers and for the other businesses that you guys come across on day-to-day and in your own businesses, are you changing? Is change sought, or is there still that reservation to actually, let's go back to the status quo, let's get everyone back to the office, let's stick with the organisational framework that we had pre-COVID, and let's just get back to kind of what we had before? Or do you see things changing now? Who wants to go first?
Well, I'll go first. I'm quite happy. Two things really. Chaos. We talk about chaos today. We talk about, it's all chaotic. It's always been chaotic. The nature of industry, the nature of business means that it's never a level playing field.
No.
You're always battling on one front or another. We've had cash flow issues. We've had, resourcing issues. We've had strikes. We've had all kinds of issues. You're dealing with them 24/7. That's just part of being in business. And what we're going through today is just another issue. It's just another follow-on from the crash of 2007, the property crashes of 87, 97, and so forth. So you have to deal with what's in front of you. What you try to do, though, is you try to take advantage of what's in front of you, not be swallowed up by what's in front of you. And the nice thing about the pandemic and the government's response to the pandemic is it's got people to ask questions. Why am I commuting for an hour every day? Why do I have to sit in an office to have a telephone conversation? Why am I actually not being paid for my commute time when I'm working on emails on my laptop? So there's lots of questions. Coinbase, the business that I run, we employ people in Estonia, we employ people in the Northwest, and we employ 2 people in Cyprus. I don't mind where they are. I don't mind what hours they work. What I do mind is about the output. Is the work being done, and is the work of a quality of which I expect and demand? And if it is, whether they do it on a Sunday, whether they do it on a Tuesday, whether it takes an hour or a day, I don't really mind. Yeah. We don't have a fixed holiday program. You go on holiday when you wish. You work the hours you wish. You work from where you wish. And it pays huge dividends. You tell anybody within a FTSE 500 company that, and they are shocked because they just will not accept the world has changed.
No.
You only need to look at the boards of businesses. You only need to look at the way that businesses go about producing reports. It's not changed since the 60s.
Yes, it's crazy. We've been remote since 2017, since we launched, and again, Brian knows, Jess knows, in terms, because we've chatted before. For me, output is one of the key drivers for future of work. Job descriptions in their artsy and fancy ways that they come across now do nothing for inclusion. And if businesses, even just looking at from that diversity inclusion angle, regardless of the productivity that comes off the back of it, if they want to be truly inclusive, they have to start looking at their job descriptions. They have to start looking at the roles within business, and defining an output, because it doesn't matter about the journey. There's too much emphasis on education or degrees now. There's other ways people get there on their journeys. And I think that, again, will really change the landscape, take the pressure off kids having to have that tertiary education. There is so much to discuss today. Jess, from your perspective in the charity sector, are you seeing change?
So I think there's some really positive changes. I think there's still a bit of reluctance, absolutely, just like Steve was saying. Like, there's some people who are like, no, let's just all go back to the office, do a 9 to 5, because that's what we've always done. Why would we change that? So I think I'm really lucky. I work in an organisation where we don't behave like that. We're absolutely output driven, and we spent a long time making sure that we're values driven as well. And I think colleagues that I have in the wider sector, I think some of those are struggling with some of their executive teams and their boards of directors, because so for example, an argument that I heard the other day was, well, the thing is, if we're not all in an office, then young people can't learn from more experienced people. And that was just kind of given as the reason for people not being able to work flexibly. Everyone had to go back to the office. But actually, it did open up a really good discussion on, but why is that? Why is that your assumption that people can only learn if they sit next to someone? Because actually, once you pick that statement apart, it's clearly rubbish. Like, some people might like to sit next to someone and ask questions, but there's been organisations that have done this remotely or on a global scale for decades. So it's clearly possible to learn from people that you're not sitting next to. But I think unless you've got someone who's in a position to question, it can be tricky.
And Jess, you sometimes wonder, is actually learning some bad habits a good thing? Are they actually learning the right things? But no, I agree. I'm quite optimistic too. I think there's some sort of bifurcation in the sense that there is a group who want to keep things as they've always been, but that's, again, has always been the case. I mean, there's always a reactionary impetus, I think, against change. But I certainly think that we're hearing a lot of. I don't think there's an element of real certainty. I think people don't really know quite what the best way to go is. I mean, I think Steve's just outlined fantastic way of working. In an entrepreneurial business. That take holiday when you like. It's all output driven. Absolutely. That's got to be the goal, hasn't it? But, I do have some sympathy for businesses that have got a very, long history of working in a certain way. And, we've heard the analogy many times about trying to turn an oil tanker. It takes a long time for it to happen. And I think it was Steve mentioned earlier about, it could be 20 years before we see some of the changes that are happening now really fully embedded. And I think that's right. There are certain sectors, of course, where you haven't got quite the same degree of flexibility. My wife and I, for example, own a beauty and wellness business, which is all about human contact. So our therapists and stylists and things have to be, there when the client needs them to be there. What we try to do, however, even then, is shape the working patterns that our team members have to things that will suit them. So if we've got, young mums, for example, we don't expect them to be here at 9 o'clock. We don't expect them to stay here beyond a certain time. If they're school age children, for example, we have a lot of part-time workers, again, as you'd expect, for this kind of industry. But we still, see them and recognize that they have immense capability. And in our business, we certainly don't, and I know this is something close to your heart, Cheney, we definitely don't see the full-time worker as the person who gets all the career opportunity. We also very much believe that the person who is bringing capability and adding value for fewer hours a week, simply because that's what they have to do for other reasons, is just as valuable. And we like to develop them. We try to develop them as well. In line. And I think even these kinds of businesses can still be more flexible than they have been historically.
Yeah. And full-time, can still be flexible, can't it? It's just about how you chop and change, how, where,
Absolutely.
when, and why you work. I think for me, looking at the wider sort of spectrum from a job seeker perspective, we are seeing change. We are seeing more people than ever before searching, and both men and women searching for flexible employment opportunities, but it's still full time that a lot of people are still searching for, but they just want to sort of break down how and when they work. So I've then, on the other hand, got loads of employers coming to me saying there's no talent out there. And I would argue, well, actually, there's plenty of talent out there, but they're just not engaging with your brand. And that's because you're not offering flexibility. It's because you're not being transparent about your culture, values, and behaviors as a business. And because you've not gone with the flow. I think certainly in the last 18 months, we've seen Darwinianism across the board in terms of human nature, in terms of, our values have changed over the last 18 months. We've lost people. We've lost a lot of people. We've lost our ability to work. Some people have lost their livelihood. Some people have lost the roof over their heads. And businesses kind of haven't followed suit. We're not seeing many businesses actually taking the temperature of the room, doing that employee engagement piece, trying to find out if their current employees have the same cultures, values, and behaviors that they had when they first engaged with that organization and went to work with them. So I guess my next question is, what needs to change? What is one thing from each of you that businesses could do today to start this change program, I guess? Steve, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. 25 years ago, I applied for a post as a branding director with a startup. And during the interview, they mentioned full-time. And I said, well, you're looking to me as the expert in brand building, and you're telling me it's a full-time job. Why don't you listen to me and I'll tell you it's actually just a part-time job. It's 2 days a week at the best of times. And that was revolutionary. They hadn't thought that through. And that's the nature. We still sit now this morning talking of full-time. What is full-time? I have clients and they said, well, I just want a part-time job. What's a part-time job? 2 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours? I work probably 60, 70 hours a week. Is that full-time? Is that double full-time? We need to get off this idea that work is one thing. Work is whatever you choose it to be. And the people making that choice is you and I, not the employer, not the businesses. We need to start to exert a little bit more agency and say, yeah, it's a part-time job, and I'll slot that into my portfolio of other gigs and see how it pans out.
Absolutely.
And that 2 day a week job turned into 3, turned into 4. And I was happy to do that as the business expanded. It never turned into 5.
No, I think that's it, isn't it? We've done in our candidate sessions, we've done a lot of work around how people find their worth, find their value, and take that to employers and have your red flags, have your things that are your set in stones that you're not going to do. And if that employer doesn't want, isn't that way inclined, then they're not the right fit, and kind of use that as a measurement for actually where you're going to be happy. Because I don't think work is work when it's your passion anywhere with it. And I know not everybody can have their passion at work, but it's more than a job. It's a big part of our lives. And I think, candidates need to be self-aware and know their worth in all of this as well. Jess, how about you? What for you is the first thing that you think could be changed, can change, or should change?
So I think one thing is maybe around thinking around the quality of the work you're asking people to do. So as an example, one conversation we've been having internally is around just being careful that, for example, we think, oh, I've got all these tasks I need someone to do, so therefore I'll write a job description based around that. But actually, obviously, if you're not careful, you end up with a really boring job and then nobody applies for it, because actually it should be the other way around. And we should be thinking, well, what are the outputs we need? Where could that person develop after this? Because obviously a lot of people now don't want the same job for their entire career. And why would you? You don't need to. But if you've got a job description that's just a task list, that's not appealing. And it doesn't help people grow within the role. And if you spend all that time recruiting them, you don't want them then to leave for a competitor who's just doing this a bit better. So I think, really thinking about the work people are actually doing and trying to make that really good quality, I think that would make a big difference.
Absolutely. Brian, I'm going to move on to you. I know you're like me in terms of how we see the world. Actually, just off the chat, I've not spoke to Steve before, and I think Steve's got the same mindset as us as well.
It's funny when he said, I don't, what's full-time anyway? I was thinking I just used the term full-time, and I was just about to say next, actually, I used the word full-time, and what does that really mean now? So, but you did it extremely elegantly, Steve. I think, for me, I like the quality point. See, I know we talk about outcomes and outputs. We talk about outputs more than outcomes, actually, and maybe we should talk more about outcomes. But there's another part of this is you can have, if you're talking about a task, it can be done well, or it can be done average, or it can be done badly. And so that really comes back to capability, doesn't it? And I think, for me, I think organizations do need to be thinking about capability, because if an organization is, and actually first and foremost, rather than the operational tasks, because if you, an old shorthand for competitiveness that I use is competitiveness equals assets times capability. If you've got great assets and poor capability, you might still have an organization that can get somewhere, and we can probably think of a few companies out there that maybe have got a monopoly on some assets that don't do a great job, but they still manage to survive because of the assets they have. But actually, most companies don't have those, extraordinary, unique assets, and they've got to rely on capability. And indeed, the capability of people is what creates assets. So it's all about people. Everything is about people. And if you can see people as having that capability either today or the latent capability tomorrow to create new value, whether that be in terms of a societal value or economic value, or preferably both, then you're starting to come at it very differently. You're not coming at it from the point of view of, I need, I think Jess put it really well, I need somebody to do this task, this task, this task, this task, this task. Yeah, lovely, really interesting. But if I need somebody to be, rethinking how we can make our customer experience off the charts better, rethinking how we can be faster, quicker, more agile, more nimble, whatever. I need people who can, have the capability to do that, to figure out what to do, and then actually to put it into practice. I'm just making this up as I go along, but the point is, if you start looking at it from a capability point of view, you're thinking in the more enlightened way, the way that we've hopefully all been we have all been talking about, and hopefully all believe. I think the analogy for me is if you're looking for advice on a legal matter, like you're buying a house or something like that, you go to a lawyer. You're buying a capability. I think, with all due respect to lawyers, you're normally overpaying for that capability, but you're only using it when you need it. And I think that's the beauty of something where you start to think about more outsource or more ecosystem type models, where you're going to people as sources of capability, much more than people that you're going to regiment and force down a particular process route. I hope that makes sense. I know I waffled on a little bit, but if
I can just come in there, because when I set up Coinbase, I didn't have a fixed idea of the team. I wasn't looking for a marketing director. I wasn't looking for a head of technology. I wasn't looking for a finance director. I can do all those things to a certain degree myself. What I was looking for was energy. And I just needed some people around me that had the capability of delivering energy to the project. And then we can shape the roles, because most people have the ability to learn a set of tasks. So you can take somebody from sales and make them a finance director. You can take somebody from the reception and make them a trader. You can take somebody from marketing and make them a super salesperson, if they've got the energy. So we've built a team now. There's only 11 of us. And we constantly look for the best people we can find. And we try to attract them into the organization. And we don't care whether they're in Estonia, San Francisco, or Cape Town. We're looking in Cape Town now. We just want the best people. And we don't even have this kind of diversity agenda thing, because rather than inclusivity, we look to be not exclusive. We're kind of agnostic as to what these people are, where they are, who they are. We just look for their ability to contribute to the team.
Yeah.
And then we'll shape them. We'll shape them.
Exactly. It's about shared values, isn't it? And everybody understanding kind of what's there. I mean, we've talked quite a lot about human workers, but actually digital workers are going to play a big part in the future of work over the next sort of 5, 10, 20 years. We're already seeing automation drastically speeding up. In terms of job losses, in terms of, COVID has really sped this up in terms of the retail sector. We've lost some massive high street brands in replace of online ones. We're seeing automations at the checkouts now becoming more and more popular. And that's just one industry. There's so many other industries that are going to be impacted by technology. So I guess my next question is around sustainability and an ever-changing environment, how that impacts the education that we provide to our children now, and how much do businesses need to be involved in what that education looks like? Do businesses need to play more of a part in what's happening politically and at the Department of Education? What does the sort of the next 5 to 10 years look like with this impact of the digital worker on our human workers? I
might as well start off. One, we don't want businesses involved in education. Education cannot be about creating a workforce in 14 years or whatever it is, because business has shown consistently that it can't foresee 14 years. Education should be about generating a real thirst for learning and an interest in subjects, so that you can pursue an educational journey long beyond school and college and university. Business should be focusing on business and innovation. We've got all these automated checkouts. That's great. But what we need to see people back in the stores. We need to see people doing jobs where there is a service ethos to it, as it was 100 years ago. There is no great value in that process apart from destroying jobs, destroying wages. So we need to see businesses persuaded to employ people and to train people into service jobs. There's no reason why there's a shortage of lorry drivers at present, none whatsoever. There is just a dearth of really good, challenging roles in that industry. A lorry driver can earn £30,000-40,000 a year, no problem, but the employment conditions are shocking. Businesses need to up their game and make sure that a lorry driver can earn that in 35 hours a week, have proper breaks, have proper facilities, be looked after and be valued. And that's what business needs to focus on. It needs to focus on being a business and stay out of politics and stay out of education, in my view.
Is there a case for role models there, Steve, just to sort of push back on your viewpoint of not getting involved? Do we not have, our children kind of need to see what is out there to be able to aim for things? Or is it, do you think it should literally just be of we just need to encourage them to want to learn, to, like you say, have that thirst for knowledge without actually putting any kind of job the five largest, most successful businesses the planet's ever seen were set up and are run by people who left college. Mm-hmm. The role models exist. You've just got to look beyond the UK at present. That's a sadness, because 100 years ago, 50 years ago, that wasn't the case. If you look at the likes of eBay, never gets mentioned with the big five, but if you look at the likes of eBay, run by very, very clever people, set up by somebody who decided to opt out of education, sat in his garage and decided to sell stuff. Facebook's the same, Apple's the same. Apple was saved by Steve Jobs coming back and saying it needs to be done differently. None of those big businesses get involved in saying that the educational agenda must be X, Y, Z. They get on and run their businesses exceedingly well. Yeah. Okay. Brian?
Yeah, I think your question was around sustainability, wasn't it? And the effect of AI in the workplace as well. And I think, I mean, it's definitely the case that AI is displacing a number of human functions. I'm slightly nervous on a different for a different reason about the AI space, and it's something we look at a lot. What I'm nervous about is programmed in bias. It's impossible to eliminate bias from data. Whatever you try to do to counteract it, there is going to be some engineered in bias, and it's just one of those things that data practitioners understand and try to eliminate. But when you've got a black box AI that's already got some bias, it's aiming off, you're getting to Archimedes' oxen in the end. You're going to have the ultimately, even if they're a degree apart, they're going to be pulling in opposite directions at the point of infinity. And and I think there needs to be a lot of attention paid to the ethics of data and the management of data and the use of data for that whole area to be sustainable itself. Otherwise, it and the companies that are using it are at risk of being discredited, actually, because all it needs is a few more racist credit cards, as we had a recent example of, purely unintentionally.
But that in itself then comes back to education, doesn't it? Because if we had more people getting through the system, more women getting through, it would be a completely different playing field in terms of what technology is coming through and the type of technology that was coming through, because they would have different life experience that would then inform on the technology that comes in the future.
Exactly right. Because if you're looking at a data set, I mean, a lot of the, Steve will know, a lot of the innovative companies, they have this phrase, we are in dog food. It's a pretty horrible phrase, actually, but what by that they meaning they use their own employees as their core data set. Well, if their own employees are white, middle class, highly educated, wealthy, people living in Palo Alto or San Francisco or something, then that data set, quite innocently, is going to be based on those people's life experiences. I'm just I don't want to digress too much, but I'm also chairman of the Cambridgeshire Chambers of Commerce, so spent a lot of time with other small business owners like myself, and I have a board member who's absolutely incredible. She's an immigrant from Zimbabwe. And she's built a care business in our region against all kinds of odds, actually, and it's very successful. And I find myself continually explaining to people that one of the reasons that I and colleagues invited her to the board was not because she's a black female immigrant. And therefore we can sort of tick some kind of diversity box. It's because none of us is. And she has a unique perspective of what it is like to be a black female immigrant building a business in this country. And therefore, her experiences are tremendously enriching by definition. They're not superior to someone else's.
No.
And she's not there because she's ticks some kind of profiling box. She's there because she has experience and insights that nobody else can bring. And that helps us in terms of using the chamber to benefit other businesses and business owners who may be, facing similar challenges. That's all. And like you said, it's the data set that you're working on. So I do think inclusion has to be there. I love the kind of color gender blind approach that Steve was articulating there, about, it really shouldn't matter, and you just want to get the best, whatever color, shape, size it is. I mean, that's got to be where we end up at the end of the day. Sadly, I think we've got a really long way to go. And if I can get sorry, I'm rambling a bit, Janie, but one of my other hobby horses is that I do think whilst the pandemic has given us a lot of opportunities to change things, I do think it's been particularly bad for women. Yeah. I think it's women who've had to deal with things like homeschooling. I think women have had to put careers on hold. I think it's women, just generally who have been hardest hit by the negative impacts. And we need to do something about that.
I think one of the key issues with the whole technology thing is we have lost perspective. We walk into the office, we see the computer, and the computer becomes the boss. Yet we bought the damn computer. You go onto a website and it asks you, "Are you a robot?" We've lost the perspective on a relationship. One of the things that we do regularly is we switch it all off. And we say, okay, fine, how would we manage with a pen and pencil? We can still run the business. Yeah. It's an online platform, and therefore it needs certain levels of technology. But in terms of management, in terms of doing our fundamental jobs, it's us. Yeah. It's not the computer. You buy a laptop, you're surprised how many young people go out thinking they need a MacBook Pro to be an author. I want to write a novel, so the first thing I do is I go out and buy my MacBook computer, and sit in a coffee shop. We've lost the track with the relationship with the technology. We are its masters, not the other way around. I fundamentally don't believe there is AI. I think there's a logic machine for sure, but I've got absolutely no experience so far of anything approaching proper intelligence from anything artificial.
No, absolutely. Jess, I saw you laughing there. Obviously, in your sector, I don't suppose you've been as hit by, in terms of AI technology. I imagine technology can help charities in a lot of ways reach further when it comes to your funding and getting information out there. How do you see sort of the rush to automation impacting your sector in particular, or the broader sectors that you work with?
Yeah, sure. So I was laughing at Steve's point, because I was thinking anyone that's ever shouted at their phones of predictive text will completely agree with everything you said. And I think, so in the charity sector, it's very different. I think there's definitely been some use of technology where people have tried it and then thought, oh, not sure. So in recruitment, for example, things like applicant tracking systems can be amazing from the point of view of you can put in things like blind shortlisting and it's very easy, or you can make sure that you actually respond to everyone that applies to you, which I know is not a thing that all organizations do, but is terribly rude. So for things like that, technology is brilliant because it's just adding value and making sure you live your values as an organization. But I think what some organizations found outside of the charity sector as well was that if you start to let that computer program make the decisions on who you even speak to for candidate perspective, that's when it goes drastically wrong, because exactly like Brian said, there's the inbuilt bias. So I think technology can be really useful in terms of helping with that quality of work we talked about earlier. But I can't see at the minute how it would replace a human doing that work, and for that to be better, because obviously that would be the reason to do it for us. I think for us it would always have to be exactly like Steve said, like it's helpful for us and we use it to make sure we get the best work done. But if you're not careful and you rely on a chatbot or you rely on a program to make a decision for you, I think you can come unstuck quite quickly.
I think
Jenny, can I just build on that a little bit and build what both Steve and Jess have been saying with a little story, if you forgive me, from the family business. We don't shame people who want to use our Wi-Fi systems at our beauty and wellness centre. But we encourage them not to, and it very, very gently. And I'll give you a case in point how that started. we had a mother and daughter come who wanted to spend the day together here, and they were having some treatments and having some lunch and everything. And it was a lovely day, and we have day beds in the grounds and so forth. And the mother was really quite stressed. You could see from, just the body language when she got here, probably a little bit uncomfortable, maybe something she hadn't done. They hadn't seen each other for quite a while. This is before COVID. And she asked for the Wi-Fi code. And actually, fortunately, it was my wife front of house that day. And she said, of course you can have it, but do you really want it? Do you really want it? So why not pop your phone away and just enjoy your day? And actually there was this kind of, and this is this tyranny of technology that Steve was talking about. There was this kind of emotional, I don't know if I can let it go for a day. Or what am I going to do? And the lady, to her credit, did. And it sort of chokes me up a little bit, because a bit later in the day we couldn't find them, the mum and the daughter, and then we found them in the grounds, curled up together, sleeping on a day bed together. And I said they hadn't seen each other for months, and the reconnection was just precious. And it's humanity, isn't it? It's human beings,
and that's the point of the future of work. It has got to become reconnected with human beings.
Absolutely.
We've had 40 years of this drive to technology. It's led us to where we are. And you look at the government response to the pandemic, it was technology driven. It was error strewn. And what we lost sight of was that those numbers in the paper were people.
Yeah.
We talk about there's not enough people stacking shelves, blah, blah, blah. They are people, and we need to understand them as people, not just dots on a spreadsheet.
Yeah. Absolutely. There is, for me, the human element, it's got to be all of it, because you look at technology as it stands. Technology needs to become cleaner. We're not just talking about sustainability for work. We're talking about sustainability of the planet. Technology is a massive polluter as it stands right now, and there needs to be more investment into greener technologies to try and undo some of the damage. We're passing a lot of this on to our children, but realistically, will our children even get the opportunity to fix these things, because everything is moving so quickly? In an ever-changing environment, which companies do you think will be the winners? What businesses will be the winners? And sort of this is kind of, I guess, summing up almost everything that we've all discussed today. What for the businesses out there that are doing things right now or that need to do things, who will be the winners? Who will we still see here in sort of 5-10 years time? Which are the areas and industries that you think can sort of grasp this moment and take us forward and actually be the winners in the future of work?
I think the biggest industry that we're going to see real innovation, and it'll be the innovators that succeed, is going to be sustainable, and it's energy related. So it's battery technology, it's the recycling of precious metals, and it's using technologies like blockchain to track those as they go through the recycling process. I doubt that any company currently in existence will be in existence as it stands in 25 years' time. I think the pace of change will see even those that we think of as entrenched, the Rolls Royces of this world, they will disappear, or they'll be subsumed into companies that truly can innovate. Because at this current rate of development, we are falling way behind where we need to be, both on terms of employability of people and everything else, and education and all that, but on just looking after the planet. We're talking now about having COP at the end of November. The decisions it takes will be knock down the long-term plan, and we'll have all these things. Nothing will change unless we people force the changes on those businesses that we're working with. We need to be a bit braver than we've been in the past. Yeah,
we need to use our voice,
and you're seeing it now with the reaction to. I mean, I was in London on tail end of last week. and they are moving back to work an awful lot faster than we are up in the north. People in London, they've got the energy, they've got the demand, they've got the need to generate those incomes, and they are pushing and being braver, and they are getting back into their offices and saying, look, we need to move on, we need to be running the country again. Whereas up here in the north, I was in town yesterday afternoon, and there's still places shut, there's still places, empty office spaces, there's still maybe 4 or 5 people on a train carriage where there used to be 50 and 100 and stuff. So it's having some courage to bring about the changes that we want to see. Yeah.
And that's with the 9% fair hike on trains as well in London. They're crazy people. They obviously earn more than we do up in the northeast. That's all I can say. Jess, yourself, where do you land on this?
So, yeah, I think that's a really interesting point around, maybe 25 years, a lot of organisations won't look the same. We've seen so many people that organisations we thought were safe are gone really quickly. I think that's a really fair point. And I think the organisations that will survive will also be the ones that do listen to, their employees, but also the wider public voice as well. Because we've got all this technology now, it's really, really easy to find out if an organisation matches up with your values. So whether you want to buy something from them or whether you want to work for them, it's really easy to work out who those people that you don't want to be involved with are. So I think if organisations just try and carry on the way they've always done it, then they will be the ones that disappear, because it's too easy now for all of us to make those decisions and essentially vote with our feet.
Absolutely. Brian?
So I think H.G. Wells was right when he said adapt or perish. It's got to be about permanent adaptation. In Bloor, we call it being a mutable business, but it could be a mutable organisation, a mutable person, continually living in a state of reinvention. And same quote, H.G. Wells said it was nature's inexorable imperative, because he was talking about primarily the animal kingdom and the need to adapt or perish, but it applies to absolutely everything. So those businesses that do survive 25 years will look completely different, and they will continue to be changing, I believe. I think they'll need to be focused now on adaptation as a core competence, where instead of looking at, we've got to change things, we'll do it once and then we're finished, they've got to look at that ability to flex, that ability to bring capability in, develop new capability, then move to something else when it's required. I think the people-centric point is really, really vital. We have to recognize that, for business to be valuable and sustainable, it has to be people-focused in terms of all its stakeholders, the people that are receiving services and goods from it or using it, and the people who are working in it or with it. And I do think we will increasingly see ecosystems around companies where there's a lot more independent organizations working with and collaboratively with, rather than the focus just being on the employee as the fundamental source of output. We may well go the way that Peter Drucker suggested we might at the turn of the century, where he said that ultimately every business will just be its management and everything else will be outsourced. We may well get to that point where the need to change is so, still so rapid that the only way to do that is not having an employee base, but to have really strong partnerships in an ecosystem of people and organizations that can give us what we need. So adaptation, very values driven, people centric. I think those are going to be the characteristics of successful organizations in the years to come.
Just a point there. If you go back to British Telecom, in the days of when it was British Telecom, it was in 97% of all UK houses. It had the resources in terms of the cash and the technology to launch Facebook 20 years before Facebook. It didn't, because its management couldn't understand how you could make something by giving away the service.
Yeah.
Now where's BT? Now it's an afterthought. It's not even a major player on the global scene, and it's even getting its TV channel in for a kicking. It's the individuals that run businesses that fail businesses. Businesses don't fail. We fail businesses by not being innovative. I love the idea of the mutable business. I am now already thinking about, rather than take on more staff, why not look to create perhaps partnership with a business that can do the next stage of development for Coinbase. Yeah, it's a great idea.
Absolutely. We work to the Mutable framework. We're definitely all on board with that
No,
front.
it's a good idea.
Absolutely. I mean, for me personally, and we've got to we're reaching our time limit in terms of our time to talk together today, but I'd really like it if you would all come back and we can talk more about this in future podcasts. For me, in final summation, and I'd love all of you to contribute one sentence to what can business leaders that are listening to this podcast do now? What one takeaway can they take from this today? And what would be your one sentence of advice? For me, it's about societal change. There's huge appetite for it right now. I would encourage employers and leaders within businesses to talk to your employees as a first jumping off point before you do anything else. What is the appetite for change within your business? Listen to your staff. Basically, that's going to be my one takeaway from the world of employers and candidates that I speak to on a daily basis. Jess, would you like to go next? What would be your one takeaway for thought leaders today and for business leaders?
So I completely agree with what you've just said, and I guess mine then would be around being authentic. So not just saying you're going to be flexible because that's what job boards are telling you, your recruiters are telling you need. Like you genuinely have to walk the talk, I think, because otherwise people won't come to work for you, they won't buy services, etc. Like we've said. So yeah, just being really authentic about what your organisation does and what you want it to be in the future.
Yeah, thank you, Brian.
I'd say I completely echo what you've just said. I would only add focus on capability and outcomes. Don't be thinking the old way about task, and employees as an engine that just does tasks. Think about unleashing and developing the capability that they already have or can bring, and think also beyond employees to all stakeholders and potential partnership organizations and so forth.
Oh, I just got a flashback there, Brian, of the amount of managers I've had over the year that goes, my door is always open. Of course it is. Steve, go on. I'm going to give you final sentence, please.
I would reflect positively on everything that Brian and Jess has said. And I would say in a single sentence, I think it was Einstein that said, a true measure of intelligence is your ability to change. Are you a truly intelligent leader, or are you not?
Yeah, I love that. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, guys. Thank you all so much for joining me today. It's been absolutely mind-blowing. I'm sure everybody listening will have a lot of takeaways and food for thought from today. So thank you very much. I hope to see you all again soon. And everybody who's listening, goodbye. We'll see you next time on Talking Flex.
Thanks, Jenny. Bye-bye.
Cheerio, guys.